Roundtable Sports Network brings you NFL divisional debate coverage on a weekly basis from your favorite content creators across YouTube, featuring the AFC East Roundtable live Monday and Wednesday evenings, the AFC South Roundtable live Tuesdays at 7 p.m. EST, the NFC South Roundtable live Tuesdays at 7 p.m. EST, the NFC West Roundtable live Tuesdays at 9 p.m. EST, the AFC West Roundtable live Tuesdays at 9 p.m. EST, the NFC North Roundtable live Wednesdays at 6 p.m. EST, the AFC North Roundtable live Wednesdays at 6 p.m. EST, the NFC East Roundtable live Thursdays at 6 p.m. EST. Roundtable Sports, real coverage from real fans.
NFC South Roundtable, how are we feeling? It feels so damn good to be back here talking about football. It's been a couple of weeks, fellas, since we were able to go live. The holidays have been absolutely crazy. The end of the season. Roundtable Sports just trying to figure out the next direction on where the network goes. Each of these divisional roundtables too. Now that the season is officially over, as you guys can see, we do have two fellas missing. We got TJ, our Saints representative, and Smitty, our Falcons representative, that currently were not able to make it this week. They'll be back next week. Don't worry. And for all of you wondering where this show goes now that the season's over, don't worry. We are going to be here all off season long, baby, talking about the draft, free agency, the biggest moves, the directions for each of these teams. This is where the hunt for the 2026 Lombardi, I guess technically the 2025 Lombardi, if you think about it, technically. So that's where it starts. This is where it starts, guys. But as always, I am Colby Cochran, your host here of the NFC South Roundtable. Today's video brought to you by BetUS. Guys, before we start really diving into this game, Bucs, Commanders, James, fortunately, your heart absolutely breaking into two pieces. Sorry, buddy. I was rooting for your Buccaneers. It didn't work out. Want to see how you guys are doing because it has been a few weeks since we have heard from you guys. James, how are you?
I'm still taking my victory lap, man. Okay. I was so upset that when the Bucs won the division and made the playoffs, yet again, we did not have a show. Everybody was wondering, where's the show? Well, I'm taking my victory lap today. Yes, the Buccaneers lost in the playoffs, but you know what? They still won the division. Four times in a row, they've won the division. So very happy about that. Did not end well, but you know what? It's okay. I'm still feeling okay, all things considered. And we're going to have a lot to dive into today. I really do believe that. So.
And what were your expectations, as the season progressed for you, James? Because I think when the season started, there were high expectations for you, for your Buccaneers, and really from Buccaneers fans, just seeing how well your team was performing. Then, unfortunately, circumstances came in, injuries. You guys started to fall as the season went on. But right there at the end, the last few weeks, you guys were able to pick it back up and turn things back on. Entering the postseason, did you feel good about your chances at potentially competing for a Super Bowl? Or was your mindset already on 2025?
Not necessarily competing for a Super Bowl. Honestly, I would have personally been satisfied if they had made it to the divisional round. I think that would have been a pretty fair expectation from this team, and they did not meet it. So, but you know what? It was a competitive game, and we'll dive into it here in a little bit. But in terms of expectations, I wasn't thinking that the Bucs could be a team that could go out there and win a Super Bowl. I quite frankly think their defense, no way, could have held up against the Lions, the Eagles, going into the next round. But I thought they could have gotten out of the wild card.
So would you consider this season a bust for the Buccaneers?
It's a good question, right? I think it's a very subjective question. Some people, and I've been racking my brain about this question, right? Because some people can say, well, it's good that they've made the playoffs 3 years in a row under Todd Bowles and have won the division 3 years in a row, right? And that is a true thing, but it's also not great that they've been 1-3 in the playoffs the past 3 years, right? That's not necessarily great either. So one, I think it's subjective. But two, I would say this season was a bit of a step back. The reason I say that is because last year they did make the divisional round. And I think in some ways, not all, the team last year just felt more successful than what it was this year. right? Yes, the record was technically better, 10 wins this year, 9 wins last year, but a first round playoff exit obviously isn't as good as making it to the divisional round last year. So I do believe to say it was like a full on bust, I don't feel like is 100% accurate, right? But I would also not say that it was an automatic success. I would say it was a bit of a step back is how I would describe it. Clay, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah.
I mean, for the Bucs, I mean, for me, I knew you guys were going to win the division. I told all these Falcons fans in the chat because I saw them trolling me. They're like, Clay, you don't know ball. You don't know what you're talking about. We got Kirk Cousins. We got Bijan Robinson. We got Kyle Pitts. And I'm like, yeah, but to beat the man, you have to beat the man. And I said that at the beginning of the season, and I was right. So, and it's a great feeling to be right. But no, for the Bucs as their season, honestly, I think that you hit your peak. Not with Baker Mayfield necessarily. I think you hit your peak with Todd Bowles. I think Todd Bowles as a coach got you as far as he can get you. And I think that the Bucs, I think in my opinion, with Todd Bowles, obviously I don't think you could done any better. I think this offseason, the Buccaneers really need to focus on the secondary. I think that's one of the biggest issues you could see with this Buccaneers team. Baker Mayfield and that, I didn't feel like he lost you that game against the Commanders. I don't think that's on Baker at all. I think that's more on this defensive side of the ball. The secondary, I think, is a major liability on the Buccaneers, and we saw that throughout the season. Your pass rush, again, to me, I thought showed some promise, but I still think it's a work in progress. And I think that's something that you guys will definitely be looking at going into this offseason. But, for you guys, I don't think you exceeded expectations, but I don't think you were below expectations. I think you were right where you were supposed to be.
Yeah, that's definitely a fair assessment. Now, what about for you, Clay? With your Carolina Panthers, obviously they didn't have a very good season, especially to start, but they picked things up as the year went on. Obviously coming off of an extremely, extremely disappointing 2023 campaign. What are your thoughts on the Carolina Panthers from this past season? Was this season a bust for you compared to what your expectations were?
No, I mean, I expected this team. I said it at the beginning of the season. I always do an early preview prediction, go through the schedule, give you my prediction of each and every game on my channel. And honestly, no, I said the ceiling of this team was 6 wins and the floor was 3, and they hit 5. So I was right there right in between the middle. And so, and honestly, I didn't think what the biggest surprise to me for the Carolina Panthers this season was Bryce Young, because when he got benched after week 2, I thought his career was over. I thought it was done. There was trade rumors. Andy Dalton took over, goes out there and balls out against the Raiders, has a decent game against Cincinnati. And then has this duck of a game in Washington, and then he gets in the car accident. And then he has another duck against the Bears, then gets in the car accident. Bryce Young's back, right? And then Bryce Young, in the last 10 games of the season, has a top 5 QBR rating, ends up throwing for over 2,100 yards, 15 touchdowns, and only 6 interceptions, and then ends up becoming the Carolina Reapers, knocks out Cardinals out of the playoffs, gets the Saints head coach fired, and then you get at the end of the year, Bryce Young goes out there, has the game of his career, throws for over 250 something plus yards, has 5 touchdowns on the day, 3 through the air, 2 rushing, and did that with a bottom tier defense, which was 32 in the league, and without Chuba Hubbard, with 2 rookie wide receivers and a 34-year-old Adam Thielen. To me, that's the biggest surprise to me.
Honestly, Clay, for me, your expectations for your Panthers this season sound very, very similar to what my expectations were for my team, which is the Patriots, right? I said that the season was not necessarily based off of wins and losses. I actually had the same ceiling as you did. I think it had us at like 4 wins minimum. So maybe I should have pumped my brakes a little bit. They did get 4, but maybe I should have pumped my brakes a little bit. But I said the season's success was going to be based off of what happened at the quarterback position. If you leave the season saying, okay, we have a quarterback that we can build around, then it was a successful season, no matter how many games you won or how many games you lost. And I think the same thing could be said for the Carolina Panthers. If you were able to leave the 2024 season saying that you actually had something at quarterback with Bryce Young after what he showed you in 2023, after you traded a haul in order to get him, then I don't think there's any way you couldn't say that this season was a success for the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, I mean, you think, you go back and look at it, nobody expected this team. And honestly, if you go throughout the media, you go throughout like every last source of media, CBS, ESPN, whatever you want, nobody expected Carolina to even make 5 wins. Most of the nation had us at 3 or 4 wins. Probably, and I even saw some people out there still had us at 2 wins. So it's like, not only that, then they also said that Bryce Young was a bust. And I was almost on that side of things, was like, man, is this guy really a bust? And I just, after watching those last 10 games of the season, I was just like, man, there's something here. And I think that I have to say this, and I said this on my show last night. I said that Bryce Young didn't save the Carolina Panthers. Dave Canales saved the Carolina Panthers with the benching of Bryce Young. Because I don't think if you don't bench Bryce, we don't see the Bryce that we saw in that last 10 weeks.
Yeah, I think you put it perfectly, too, because we've talked about this so many times. I think we've talked about it ad nauseum. And that's just the fact that when you sit your quarterback, whether that's for an entire year, multiple years, a month, a few games, half the season, no matter how long you sit a quarterback, it has proven on so many different accounts to actually have a positive impact, because with the quarterback position, it's not just all physical. It's really more mental if you think about it than it is physical. And with that being said, if your guy's overwhelmed, if he's losing the confidence, then that is going to affect the play that physically he puts out there on the field, the product that he puts out there on the field. So giving him some time to just sit back, relax, calm down, and figure things out before he goes out there to lead an entire team at the hardest position to play in sports, again, is a very smart thing to do, and that's been proven on several different accounts. But fellas, before we start getting into this game, the Bucs and Commanders, do want to give a massive shout out to the sponsors of this video over at BetUS. Right now, when you guys sign up on the mobile app or on their website and you use the code YouTube150 that you see on the screen, that is YouTube150, you will lock yourselves into a limited time exclusive offer of a 150% sign up bonus on your first deposit, followed by 125 on your next 2, all the way up to $2,000. Look, the season's over, right? We know that none of your teams are going to be playing until 2025, the beginning of the 2025 season, but you can still have a little bit of extra fun. We still got the rest of the playoffs. We got the Super Bowl that you can bet on. Not just that, but BetUS has the best betting variety in the business. So if you're like, if it's not my team, I don't want to bet. That's perfectly fine. That's understandable. I totally get it. But you can use this deal on the NBA, on hockey, baseball, horse racing, fighting, politics, entertainment, you name it, and BetUS is going to have it. And the deal does not stop there, because they're also giving you 10% back on your net losses 2 times a year, something that no other sportsbook is doing, and giving you your very own personalized account manager on top of having live wagering on all major games. Play smart, play responsible, never bet more than you can afford to lose. But remember that supporting the sponsors that supports the channel supports not just everybody here at the NFC South Roundtable, but everybody at Roundtable Sports. But fellas, let's go back and let's start breaking down this game, because we did have a playoff game in the division. We had the Washington Commanders traveling to play your team, James, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Again, I want to emphasize the fact that you did have the advantage. It was a home game.
Don't say that, Cole. Hey, now hold on, Cole. Now hold on.
It was a home game.
Yeah, it was.
But you guys did fall a little bit short in what was an absolute cinematic game. This game defines what playoff football is all about. You guys end up falling 23-20. You lose with a last-second doink that gives them that final edge of 3 points, and they come out victorious. James, what happened here? Break it down for me.
Well, depression is what happened. But I guess following before that, man, first I want to say offensively, I thought the offense played a fine game. I know a lot of people are going to say, look, if there was an end around play, I don't know if you guys watched the whole game, but if there was an end around from Jalen McMillan, it was bad execution, resulted in a fumble, right? And a lot of people say if that fumble didn't happen, the Bucs would have won the game. I am more of the mindset of a game does not come down to one specific call or one specific play, right? However, the offense was still concerning. It just felt clunky and at times just out of sync, which was unfortunate. I still have a lot of faith in Liam Cohen, and I'll mention that in a moment. But the offense was a bit of a disappointment. However, defensively was also a pretty decent disappointment. I mean, Clay mentioned earlier that he feels that the Bucs have peaked with Todd Bowles at head coach. Here's something that's interesting about this game. The Washington Commanders did not punt once in this football game. They went for it 5 times on 4th down. They got 3 out of the 5 times. Okay. The 2 times they did not get it was, I believe, once was on the Buccaneers 4-yard line, and then once was on the Buccaneers 20-yard line. So if you say that both those 4th downs, they just kick a field goal instead, this game wouldn't have had to have come down to a last-second field goal like it did. But really, Todd Bowles' defense struggled in this game. I think they struggled to tackle. They did not get any takeaways they did not get any takeaways on defense. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but the Buccaneers had 7 interceptions this year as a football team. 7.
Wow.
And that's the lowest in team history. It is. And you just saw the glaring issues of this Buccaneers defense come to light in this game. And it's unfortunate. It is. And now the Bucs, based off this game, kind of have a bit of an interesting decision to make, in my opinion, right? Because Liam Cohen, I don't think you can let that guy leave the building. I've been talking about this for feels like half a year now since we've been on here. He has an interview with the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Raiders head coaching job is open. What are you going to do if Liam Cohen comes to the Bucs and says, hey, I'm literally about to go take this job, right? It's an interesting question. And I haven't been shy of this opinion. I think you promote Liam Cohen to head coach. I think you have to.
Wow.
Not just because of the belief that I have in Liam Cohen as an offensive coordinator, but personally, people may have different opinions, and I understand that injuries were a concern this year defensively, and just not having a great roster defensively was a bit of a concern as well. But personally, I have been tired of the inconsistency with Todd Bowles' defense on a week-to-week basis, and really just the inconsistency with Todd Bowles-led teams. I mean, yes, you can make an argument of 3 years in a row, he went from 8 wins to 9 wins to 10 wins, but this is the second year in a row where the Buccaneers started 4-6, and quite frankly, or 4-6, 4-7, and quite frankly, had to go on an improbable run, to go and make the playoffs, right? And that's not sustainable. 2 years in a row, I understand some people may say, well, it's becoming a trend. I don't believe that. I think that it was just another outlier. And I think that Todd, quite frankly, Liam Cohen and last year, Dave Canales saved Todd Bowles' job. I really do believe that, because without having the offense being what it was last year, and especially being what it was this year, you'd be looking at an entirely different scenario in terms of where the Bucs would have finished this year. So personally, I've definitely, and we've talked about this for a while now, I've worn thin on Todd Bowles in his time with Tampa Bay. And while it is respectable that, yes, he's made the playoffs 3 years in a row. Yes, he's won the division 3 years in a row. Context is very important to understand how the Bucs were doing it. And it wasn't convincingly. So this game really felt like a microcosm of the entire season of the Bucs, which was inconsistency. And, you know, it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. And now we'll see if the Buccaneers do make proper decisions going forward to try and improve on what they need to do.
Yeah, for sure. And I have a couple questions for you, James. Is, you know, number one, who do you put that overall end around on? Because I saw that as a topic going around Twitter. There was a lot of debates going around Twitter. It's on Baker, it's on McMillan. Who personally would you put that on? Because that's all about timing, right? That's all about everybody executing together at the same time, everybody being on the page at the same time. And my next question for you would be, could Todd Bowles be fired? Is that a direction that realistically you guys could take, or do you think that he stays around?
So to answer the first question, I think it's a little bit of both, right?
Mhm.
Like, I think it is just a bit of an execution error. Honestly, I don't mind the play call. I know some people have been
good play call.
criticizing Liam Cohen in terms of the play call. I honestly do not mind the play call at all. It's a jet sweep, man. You know, like I saw some people say, well, you don't call that at your own 15. It's not like he was calling like it's not like Liam Cohen was deep in the depths of his bag, was like, dude, we're going to have a lineman. We're going to have a lineman motion, and then we're going to flea flick it back to him, and then he's going to do like a spin and then throw it back to the running back, and then he's going to like fake hurdle and then throw it. Like, you know, it's like, it's not something dumb like that. It's an end around, you know, it's a jet sweep. It's a play. So really, I think it was just a little bit of execution on both guys, and it is what it is. I think it's also a bit disappointing that the Bucs have one turnover, though, in a game. That was their only turnover in the game, and that was enough. The offense had to play perfect ball, otherwise they couldn't win. That's not exactly complimentary football from the rest of the team, in my opinion. And I believe the offense played a lot of hero ball to success throughout the entire year, and they make one mistake, and that was the cost of it. So, I mean, you know, it was just very, very unfortunate. But to the second question, could Todd Bowles be fired? Another good question. Right now, today, I don't believe Todd Bowles will be fired if Liam Cohen stays. And that's a big if, right? I really do believe that if the Bucs are in danger, legitimate, serious danger of losing Liam Cohen, you likely see Todd Bowles out, right? The Bucs have not been shy. And I know people are going to say, look, he made the playoffs 3 years in a row. He won the division 3 years in a row. They fired Tony Dungy. I mean, and he took them to the playoffs 3 years in a row, and they still fired him. John Gruden won him a Super Bowl. They eventually fired him too. If the Bucs feel, in the Glazier family, the owners of the Bucs feel like it is in the team's best future interest to remove 62-year-old Todd Bowles and promote 39-year-old potential offensive guru Liam Cohen, then that's what they're going to do. And personally, I think it's the right move, because how many years do you have left of Todd Bowles? He doesn't want to. He said he's come out and said he doesn't want to coach till he's 70 years old. 2 years, 3 maybe. You would have a lot of years left of Liam Cohen if it does work out. Now, that's, of course, a big if as well. But I've seen a lot of people compare him to, like, hopefully, you know, the next Sean McVay or the next Kyle Shanahan. And we don't know if that's 100% going to be what's there, but it's a possibility. That's an exciting possibility, right? Whereas Todd Bowles, especially his defense, just produced a bit of a step back of type of season, like I said a little bit ago, and you're coming away with a lot of questions, right? A lot of questions. Also, the timeout management towards the end of the first half and even the game as well was just tough. Here's an interesting thing, by the way, from the game. The Commanders had 7 drives in this game, guys. 7. Okay, not including the kneel down, because that doesn't count. The Bucs also had 7 drives in this game, okay? 5 out of these 7 drives the Washington Commanders had were 10 or more play drives. Damn. That's insane. That's insane. They had drives of 9.5 minutes, 5.5 minutes, 7 minutes, like you name it. They completely dominated, and Todd Bowles' defense couldn't get off the field. It's just a bad look, man. It's a bad look. So, but will he be fired? I think it all depends on what happens with Liam Cohen.
Yeah, I mean, what really is Todd Bowles sticking around for at this point, too? Because I feel like what you're expecting from him as a defensive-minded coach is year in and year out a good defense, right? He should be able to take over that side of the ball and consistently make it good. And it did feel like really throughout the course of this season, and even in this playoff game, the reason that you failed, the reason that you had so many hurdles to get past was because of that lack of a consistent defense, the lack of a consistent secondary, penalties at the worst times, complimentary football, a lack of a pass rush. And that comes back down to Todd Bowles. So, I think if you guys move in the direction of an offensive-minded head coach, somebody who can help Baker succeed a little bit more, maybe, Liam Cohen goes out then and he finds a proven veteran defensive coordinator that can just essentially be the head coach to the defense and start to kind of re-implement and revamp that side of the football. And now you guys are really starting to cook with fire. I don't think Liam Cohen's going to last a whole lot longer there in Tampa Bay if you guys don't make that move very quick. As a Patriots fan who was just going through this process with trying to figure out who our head coach was. Now, obviously, we figured out who it was, but going through that process and hearing about all the other teams in their interviews, Liam Cohen was a guy that was consistently mentioned. And with teams being less patient each and every single year, if their head coach isn't working out, if their quarterback isn't working out, they are more willing than they've ever been to immediately cut ties with those guys, which is why I'm saying if you do not promote Liam Cohen this year, next year at the latest, then he's probably a guy that's not going to stick around because he is one of the hottest names and growing names in the coaching pool. But Clay, what do you think about this game? And what do you think about the direction of Todd Bowles?
Yeah, again, when you watch this game, the Buccaneers entered this game, wild card game, obviously with the odds in their favor. I felt like, you're the 3 seed, slightly betting favorites, and the Bucs carried the weight of expectation. But in the world of the NFL, we know football is unpredictable. And so the Commanders to prove to be the Tampa Bay's kryptonite. And it's just like I said earlier. Again, the major issue for me, if I was a Bucs fan, it would be that the secondary is a major liability. Like the Buccaneers in this game, the secondary was exposed, and injuries alone can't take all the blame. Yes, losing Jamel Dean to injury hurt this depth, but even when Dean was healthy, his performances were inconsistent at best. You got Zion McCollum, who was just an outright liability on Sunday with penalties for, blown coverages, seemingly followed him on every play in this game, and every time a flag hit the turf, you could see Bucs fans collectively just assumed that it was McCollum that was involved. So they have a depth issue there, and it's a talent problem from the secondary standpoint. I think a lot of the time Tampa Bay tends to lean too heavily on some of their impact players like an Antoine Winfield, So I think that's a tough call there for the Bucs. As for the pass rush, like I said earlier, I think it's still a work in progress, but again, it showed promise. You have Cansey, Diaby, Vita Vea. They all made contributions. They were seemed like they were applying constant pressure throughout this game. But just Jaden Daniels was just able to extend plays and exploit some of these defensive lapses, I guess you could say. He was out there, and I think he was out there finishing plays where the Bucs weren't. Right? They just weren't able to capitalize on some critical moments on the field. If you watch that game, but the biggest thing I took away from this game too was Todd Bowles got outcoached after halftime. If you watch the first half compared to the second half, he got outcoached in the after halftime. If you go watch this game, so I mean, again. Todd Bowles is a liability, man. Like time and time again, I've said this, that Bowles and it's not necessarily Liam Cohen. It is some of these other staff members, I think, too, have just found ways to outmaneuver opposing coaches after the break. During the season, they could do that. But when Dan Quinn and certain other teams are just able to flip that script, and they came back out there at halftime, and they had a clear plan to exploit Tampa's defensive vulnerabilities in the secondary. They leaned heavily on Jaden Daniels, running back Austin Eckler in the passing game. They took advantage of mismatches, and there was a lot of soft coverages underneath if you watch that game. And the Commanders' offense played smart, and they played disciplined football, and they were constantly taking what that defense gave them. and the Bucs adjustments just fell flat, and the defense looked unprepared in the second half with the changes that the Washington made. And Bowles usually is a guy that I will say throughout the year, his halftime message, at least in this game, seemed to lose its impact compared to what we've seen throughout the season. So unfortunately for Tampa Bay, I think this was a big coaching letdown that occurred in the most important game of your season. Again, I think Baker Mayfield, you can't blame him for that loss. Yes, he fumbled a botched handoff in exchange which was an easy scapegoat. And I know that had to frustrate fans. And I've seen some people pin him on that loss just because of that fumble, let alone, but you can't blame that on him. And another thing is Tampa Bay's run game. I mean, what happened? I mean, it stalled when it mattered most. Like, Tampa Bay has been a team that has been able, if I'm not mistaken, they're a top 10, top 5 rushing team in the NFL right now. So it was crazy to me to just see them, like with Bucky Irving and Rachaad White, just get stalled out like that. Again, I think this is a big blame on Todd Bowles. And I think you got to look at the bigger picture here going forward. Is it worth keeping a guy that doesn't want to coach till he's 70-something years old? He's definitely peaked out as a head coach. Just go ahead and move on with Liam Cohen or somebody else that's younger and hungry and ready to coach in the league. And Dave Canales is one of those guys that's proved that as well.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, is like I alluded to this a little bit earlier, the fact that you're a defensive-minded coach. And this game came down to 3 points. You could not let them get into field goal range. You could not let them dominate time of possession, stay on the field, control the clock the way that they did, because you knew how they were going to try to win this game. They didn't care if they won this game in overtime, by a touchdown, by a field goal. They were just trying to get away with this win and go into the next round, and they did it exactly how they wanted to. You allowed them in the most pivotal moment, in the situational moments, to walk all over you. And again, that comes down to the defense. That comes down to Todd Bowles. And when you're a defensive-minded coach in the most pivotal game of your entire season, you absolutely cannot allow things like this to happen. But Corey's coming in here. Corey's firing back a little bit, but he has some really good super chats, really the sponsor of today's video, if you think about it. So I want to get into these. Corey comes in with a $20 donation. Let's go, Corey.
Man.
He says, they didn't dominate up until that fumble. They had 13 points. They went for it on multiple fourth downs. Defense won some, Commanders won some. The lack of complementary football doomed the Bucs. It wasn't all about the defense. It definitely wasn't all about the defense, but the defense bit them in the situational moments that mattered the most.
Yes, I agree with that. I mean, what happened at the end of the game? The Commanders had a 10-play, 51-yard drive that ate up 4 minutes, 41 seconds. After the Bucs tied it up, Commanders literally burned all the clock and won the game.
Yeah. The reality is that this loss came down to the lack of depth by the Bucs, the conditioning, and the execution on the defense. Not one turnover from the quarterback. And again, the lack of adjustments by Todd Bowles in the second half, or the ones that he did try to make, fell flat. And, they got exploited. And Washington made those correct adjustments at halftime, the Commanders made the right adjustments at halftime, and Todd Bowles just didn't capitalize on it.
Yeah, and I mean, did that fumble offensively ultimately kill the Bucs? Sure. I mean, it definitely contributed. It definitely felt like that was a major switch of momentum, but that is not the reason that they lost the game. If you are looking back on this game and saying that one fumble, one mistake by the offense is the reason that they lost the game, you got to look from a wider range, because one fumble, one little mistake from an entire football game of 4 quarters, it comes down to much more than one little mistake. But let's get on to this next donation from Corey. Let's go, Corey. You're killing the super chat game today. He says, outcoached. He held the Commanders to 3 points before the fumble, got multiple red zone stops. You guys did not watch the same game. They had 13 points. We're talking more about situational. I don't care about what you did before. If, as the game progresses in the fourth quarter, when it matters the most, you have to get the stops and you're not able to do it, that's what matters. What can you do in those pivotal situational moments? I don't care what you do for 3 out of 4 quarters. If in the fourth quarter in a close game, you completely collapse.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that your run game stalled out, which has been your backbone to take the pressure off of Baker Mayfield anyways and the rest of his offense. Because when Mike Evans Mike Evans just can't do it all on offense for Baker Mayfield. Like, Kate Otton's got to step up. McMillan also almost had a touchdown catch in that end zone. I remember that. But, at the same time, man, like the reality is that he got outcoached by halftime. It's just like I said, the second half adjustments, which is something normally Todd Bowles, I give him credit about, is that he's able to make those adjustments. And he was able to do that time and time again to outmaneuver other coaches. But in this game, particularly, Dan Quinn flipped that script. And, like I said, Washington came out at halftime. And their clear plan was to exploit Tampa Bay's defensive vulnerabilities, lean heavily on Jane Daniels and running back Austin Eckler, especially in the pass game. And they took advantage of the mismatches, and there was a lot of soft coverage underneath. You're watching the same game I was watching. So, the Commanders played smart in the second half. They played disciplined football in the second half, and they were consistently taking what the defense gave them. It's simple as that. Like, I watched that full game, and, that's what I saw.
Yeah, I mean, again, look, the offense, I get it. The fumble's not good, right? That was the only turnover the offense had of the game. No turnovers from the Commanders. That's not good from the defense.
No.
I mean, 5 out of the 7 drives for the Commanders went 10 plus plays. That's not good from the defense. Yes, they did have 2 turnovers on downs. That was good, right? The Commanders could have kicked field goals in those situations, and then the game wouldn't even came down to 23-20, right? And then here's what matters to me too. Like, the offense did tie it at the end of the game. It was 20-20. And this is yet another situation where, hey, trust the defense to try and get off the field. And it was a 10-play, 51-yard drive that ate up the last 4 minutes, 41 seconds of the clock in the game to lose the game. And that's not something we've seen just in this playoff game from the defense. We saw that against the Atlanta Falcons a couple of times. We saw that against the Kansas City Chiefs. We saw that against the San Francisco 49ers. We almost saw it against the Carolina Panthers, but the Chuba Hubbard fumble happened. So, I mean, I agree with what you guys are saying, where situationally, the defense has not been able to close out a ton of games this year. And that's a concern. And I think to say that it's not a concern is not accurate. And to say hey, it is what it is. Like, if we want to talk about trends, that's a trend that the defense hasn't been able to close out games this year.
Yeah, here's the thing. I think Baker Mayfield's a guy that can get you as far as a golf can. Like, I think he's a guy because right now, if you go look at his stats and you compare it to Jared Goff, they're pretty damn close, if I'm not mistaken. So it's like, if Jared Goff can get you this far, which we'll see how far this Lions team goes this year, which now with that Vikings team out, it's going to be interesting as the playoffs go forward. But, I think that let's see how far Jared Goff went to a Super Bowl. If Jared Goff could go to a Super Bowl, I don't see why Baker Mayfield can't. And if you go look at it statistically, but man, I just think that for the Bucs, you got to get a younger head coach. And I think this offseason, you got to let Todd Bowles go. You got to get a younger head coach, an offensive-minded guy. You go out, you get a different defensive coordinator, a smart defensive coordinator, and you're not going to get a Brian Flores, but you're going to get somebody that can call the damn plays for this defense. Go out, rebuild that secondary that needs to be done because it's a liability. You cannot lean on Antoine Winfield week in and week out, right? And Levante David's probably got maybe 1 year left. You need to build that linebacker room back up. The defensive line's good. I think you're set with Cansey and Diaby and Vita Vea for the next couple of years, right? Maybe even years to come. And then, you need to rebuild that those guys can fill those run lanes and those gaps and drop back into coverage when need be. But man, I just think that you have peaked with Bowles. I think Bowles has gotten you as far as he can get you, and it's time to move on. And if it's Liam Cohen, or if it's, who knows, maybe you shock the world and you get the Ben Johnson, right? You never know. Like, I mean, but if I'm the Bucs going forward, I'm looking at rebuilding this defense, maybe adding a couple offensive pieces that maybe feels, add some depth. But I think you have to move on from Todd Bowles and take that younger offensive-minded head coach.
Yeah, for sure. I don't want to completely crap on the defense, because it's not like the entire game they sucked or anything like that. That's not what I'm trying to say. That's what neither of these guys are trying to say either. I mean, there was a hold by Zion McCollum in the end zone. It gave the Commanders a fresh set of downs on the 1 yard line. That is an easy 7 points. And somehow the Buccaneers defense was able to stand pat at the 1 yard line, actually make a couple plays, set them back even behind the line. I believe it was a toss or a run up the middle that they stopped them a few yards behind the line of scrimmage.
It was a toss outside toss play.
And then they held them to a field goal.
Yeah.
So there were really good moments by the defense. But again, it was the lack of complementary football, and it was the lack of closing things out defensively when it mattered the most. Like I said, like James said, like Clay said, it doesn't matter what you can do early on in the game. When you're down to the wire, the game is close. What can you do in those pivotal situational moments to make sure that your team comes out victorious? And ultimately,
and another thing about Todd Bowles is the one thing that I've noticed with Todd Bowles, he is a poor game manager. I'm sorry. Yeah. His game management is terrible. If you go look at the time of possession compared to the Commanders, it's not even close. It's not even close. And I was just like, man, what are you doing? What are you doing out there? And I think there was one time where he should have called a timeout and he didn't. And I can't remember what play it was on, but I felt like there was one. And I was just like, man, why didn't you call a timeout? I can't remember which one it was. I see the play, but it was just like, man, why did you not call the timeout on that play?
Yeah, I agree. But shout out to Corey, too.
James,
Corey,
do you remember that play that he didn't call that timeout on?
It was the end of the first half. I believe it was the end. It was right at the end of the first half.
Yes. Like, why not call the timeout there? Like, what are we doing?
I was shocked, too. I was like, why are we not calling it? Baker had to call the timeout on the drive. Wow. Baker had to call the time. They burned. It was like
have to be calling the timeout.
Yeah, I think it was like 19 seconds were burned off the clock. Baker was one who had to call the timeout. So,
and that's 19 seconds that they could have.
No, thankfully it did work. They did it ended up okay. They scored the touchdown, but if they didn't, that would have been really bad.
Yeah, but you shouldn't even had let that 19 seconds go off the clock.
Yeah.
The other thing, too, is that if Todd Bowles only wants to coach for at maximum a couple more years, and he has that like set deadline on it, how checked out is he on the team? Because if he's even minusculely checked out on the team, then he's not going to care as much. And if he's even slightly checked out, he's not going to call the right things. He's not going to care about winning championships. And you need, especially the head coach, to be locked in all season, all off season long. You need him to be motivated, because if your head coach isn't motivated, if he doesn't care, that's the exact tone that's going to be set with the football team. It just feels like the writing is on the wall for Todd Bowles. And if this team wants to adapt to what the NFL is today, it's by getting younger, going with an offensive-minded coach. And I think that would be a beautiful setup for Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers in the direction that they're currently headed. But let's see, we got about 15 minutes left. Clay, do you want to get into kind of the end of the season recap for the Carolina Panthers, or do you want to wait to do that till next week? We'll leave that up to you.
No, I mean, we can get into it now.
Let's do it. Because we didn't get to hear like the last 2 games. Because we haven't been here.
I was family time.
Family time right there, baby. Let's go.
Yeah, most of it was. But yeah, the last 2 games of the season, you lose to the Bucs, you get blown out in that game. That's not Baker. I'll say this in that game. Baker had a hell of a game. The defense, again, for Carolina is still atrocious. It has been. And honestly, I've came to realize that it was never Ejiro Evero's fault. Like the issue with the Carolina Panthers defense all season long, it just lacks talent. It lacks depth. You lose Derek Brown. You end up losing, you had Josie Jewell out for a couple of weeks with an injury. You had Jordan Fuller out with a couple of weeks with injury. And then you had, you lose JC Horn for the last 2 games of the season, but, guy makes the Pro Bowl. And he basically plays a full season in the first time in his career. Right. So that's huge for him. You lose, but you lose Shaq Thompson and Derek Brown at the beginning of the season. You DJ Wano doesn't come back till week 10. You got Jadeveon Clowney, basically the only guy out there. Ashawn Robinson showed up, had 5.5 sacks to finish the year. I think DJ Wano finished with 5.5 sacks, and I think Clowney either had 5 or for 4 or 5.5, something like that. So the thing is, man, like Carolina, they got crushed by the Bucs, but that wasn't Bryce Young's fault. Bryce Young actually had a decent game in that game. He didn't throw any picks, didn't have any turnovers. He did get sacked like 6 times in that game, though. That was a good game for the Bucs defense and that pass rush. But the last game of the year for me, though, man, that was just the icing on the cake. The defense, again, it was still atrocious in this game, but the biggest, again, like I said, was Bryce Young, man. Just goes out there, leads this team, has over 5 touchdowns in the game, takes this team to overtime, wins it in overtime, and, proves that, it gives Carolina Panthers fans hope, right? It gives them the hope that this guy is the true franchise guy. And I think a lot of people believe in him. And I would say I'm a believer of him. I would say I'm a believer of him to an extent, right? I believe in him that he can be the franchise guy. I think the potential is there. I think going forward, I need to see what I don't expect him to go out there and have a 5 touchdown game every week, but I do need to see these 200-yard games and 2 touchdown type of games, right? 250, something like that, where we're putting up, yardage through the air, right? And I think if Bryce can play like he did the last 10 games of the season, and you had a running back in Chuba Hubbard, you get this kid a number 1 wide receiver, I think the potential is really there. Dave Canales I think he's proven that he is a QB whisperer, right? What he's already done now with these last 10 games with Bryce Young, what he did with Geno Smith, what he did with Russell Wilson, what he did with Baker Mayfield. It's proven that the guy knows quarterbacks, and he knows how to really get these guys to their full potential. And I think we're just seeing the beginning of Bryce Young with the potential that Dave Canales can get him. But yeah, that Falcons game, man, turned a lot of heads. I think it turned a lot of critics behind, and I was one of them because I was basically out on Bryce after week 2, and so again, it was the biggest shock for me to see a kid just go out there and compete and keep it was like watching Bryce, how he played at Alabama, because there was no stopping this Falcons team defensively. We could not stop the run. You could. Michael Penix was looking like the next coming of Peyton Manning in this game because of our defense. It's just like so. But then for DeBryce to go out there and lead this offense and lead this team and put up 44 points over the Falcons and win that game. And then we got Jimmy Lake fired, which all Falcons fans in the chat, you're welcome. You're welcome, because I know all of you guys were ready for him to go. So the Carolina Reapers hit again for you. And so, yeah, I think the way we finished is huge. I think it's a great momentum. I think what Dave Canales is doing is he's trying to build a culture. He's trying to build that keep pounding culture, because they could have just laid down and been like, we're just going to get the next quarterback in this draft. Or they could have just said, well, we're just going to get the number 1 overall pick and whatever. Right. So I think for me, it was a nice momentum swing, and we get to go into this offseason, rebuild this defense the way it needs to be. Get Bryce a true number 1 wide receiver. Grab a few pieces here and there on the offense just to add some rotational depth, but defensively, has to be a complete overhaul. It has to be a complete overhaul. So and that's what I'm looking forward to, man. And I love off-season content because I get to talk a lot about the draft and these upcoming players and the free agency and in the cap space and stuff like that. So the way we finish it out is the way I wanted to finish out. And, I was very close. I said this team's ceiling was 6 wins and I told the floor was 3. I told you guys the floor was 3 and we hit 5 wins and it's 3 more wins than we had last year. And at least we just didn't lay down and tank the season. And that's all I can ask. So I'm excited as a Panthers fan because we finished the season the right way.
Yeah, right. As long as you can hit on the quarterback position, then you have something to build on. I remember this time last year, free agents didn't want to come to play in New England, not because of the money. The Patriots had more than enough money to go out and spend. They finished this season with still around $50 million left in cap space, but team said that the reason they didn't want to play for them is because they didn't have a quarterback, right? So if your team doesn't have a quarterback, a solidified quarterback, free agents simply don't want to come there. And I think maybe now that you have some tape that you can show free agents, hey, you want to come here because, look, we have an upcoming, quarterback who's young and it can be a star in this league. Now you have players that will want to come play for your organization. And when I look at the Carolina Panthers from an outside perspective, not as a fan or anything like that, I feel like their biggest problem is just the lack of talent, not enough blue chip players, not enough game-changing players right now.
Exactly.
And you are simply just not going to win football games and go somewhere if you don't have the talent to back it up. It doesn't matter if you have a good quarterback, good coaching, you don't have the talent. It's simply not going to produce the product on the field that you're looking for. But James, do you have any, last minute kind of thoughts here on how the Carolina Panthers ended the season, how Bryce Young ended the season before we wrap up?
I think it's very encouraging. I mean, now you have a lot less questions to worry about, right? In terms of like, who's your quarterback going to be? And just some of the offensive stuff as well. Also, hey, seems like getting rid of Deontay Johnson was a great move because this dude just got cut from his 3rd team.
That's
you
crazy,
ain't lying,
dude.
man. Good God.
I mean,
I want to know what happened. Like, what's going on?
The guy's a head case, man. He's a head case, and he just can't stop running his mouth.
Was he like this in Carolina, though?
It didn't seem that bad in Carolina compared to him being in the Ravens and then going to the Texans. And then, it was, from what I can tell, it wasn't that bad. I don't know what it is. I'm wondering if it's a contract thing where he's just like, I'm not playing unless I get this amount of money. But man, like, what have you done to prove that you deserve a big contract?
Yeah, or I mean, like, I think he was worried about targets and stuff, and it's like, dude, you've been on these teams for like a week. Like, what are you talking? Like, you don't even know. Like, I don't think you know the playbook fully. Like,
you would have thought that with him being in the Ravens, that was the thing about Deontay Johnson. I'm like, okay, that's a good fit for him. Like, he's gonna go there. Zay Flowers is the only guy. The Rashad Bateman, actually, I mean, he balled out in the last playoff game. But damn, man, like, you would think that this guy would have gotten some type of like, you would have thought that this guy would have had 1,000 yards because the way he looked in Carolina, because he looked great. But I think it's a head case. I think he's a head case, and I think he gets his mouth gets him in trouble.
Yeah. So I mean, shout out to the Panthers. This second half of the season was really encouraging because it felt like they're finally starting to build up something right. And like getting rid of a guy like Deontay Johnson is part of that. Seeing the growth of Bryce Young is a big part of that, right? And like, it seems like they finally have some good leadership in place. And if you're a Panthers fan, that's something to be very excited about, right? Because now you've got Chuba Hubbard, now you've got Bryce Young, you've got some pieces on offense. Don't necessarily know if they should keep, what's his name? Ejiro, the DC.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up because I did say this. It's not Ejiro Evero's fault that this defense is as bad as it is. If you go look at this roster, half of these guys aren't starting. They are practice squad players. Like, you go look at our defensive roster because of the injuries we've had in certain positions. This is practice squad players playing. And there's nothing that they can do about it due to the injuries. And another thing I want to let you guys know too on this, that there was reports that came out that they fired some of the defensive coaching staff, actually 2 of the defensive coaching staff, and then they fired their athletic trainer and their athletic director.
Okay, so There you go. So they are making some changes, right? So I mean, like, the Panthers, I think, have a pretty bright future going forward, in terms of, hey, we know what we need, right,
Mhm.
to build off of this. And
Yep.
that's an encouraging thing because a lot of teams don't necessarily have those answers, right? They have a laundry list of problems, right? The Panthers, you can kind of picture what they need to do,
Yeah.
right? And that's an encouraging thing. And the most important parts of, do they have a quarterback? Seems like they do. Do they have a head coach? Certainly seems like they do. Like they're doing it the right way at the most important spots. And that's an encouraging thing, in my opinion.
For sure.
Yeah, 100%. Last super chat here comes from none other than Corey. Corey is we're talking about BetUS being
He's
the
on
sponsor
fire,
of today's
man.
video.
He's
It
on
really
fire.
might be Corey. It really might be. But Corey comes in and says, also too many Saints, Panthers, and Falcons fans talking nonsense. Can't lose a playoff game if you don't play in the playoffs. We are building a culture.
Cultured.
We are building a culture.
I mean, yeah, I agree. Like this is obviously literally an unprecedented era in the Bucs right now. Like 4-time NFC South champions, 5-time playoff appearances. But on one hand, right, you are happy, you do appreciate that for what it is. But on the other hand, you see the room for growth and improvement. Right.
Mhm.
You do. You see that this team can be better than what it is right now. Right. And eventually, like, those expectations do have to get raised. Right. If you do want to really build a culture, then expectations do have to get raised at some point. So it's an interesting thought process. And I guess ultimately we'll see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. But hey, guys, look, that is going to end it for today's segment of the NFC South Roundtable. Again, didn't have TJ here today, didn't have Smitty, but they will be back next week when we start getting into our off-season content. This is where I think it's the most fun. Everybody loves the regular season. As a content creator, I love the off-season because this is where we talk about each individual team, how they can rebuild. That's where the optimism is the highest. So a lot of really, really, really great content that we're going to be bringing you guys this offseason. Another big shout out to BetUS for sponsoring today's video. Make sure when you guys sign up and get that exclusive offer, you use the code YouTube150 to get a 150% sign up bonus on your first deposit, followed by $125 on your next two, all the way up to $2,000. That is a deal on your first 3 deposits right now. But I am Colby Cochran with Roundtable Sports, logging off, and until next time, stay safe.